For decades, France held Africa in a firm grip, economically, militarily, and politically. From colonial rulers to post-independence partners, France never truly let go. But today, the tide is turning.
Some countries have been exploiting uranium to produce energy for themselves. From Ottawa to Paris, the streets are lit up. That's the light. But in Niger, it's darkness that is served to us. They enjoy saying it every year in their economic surveys. Burkina Faso is the poorest country, Mali is the poorest country, Niger is the poorest country. We are ranked among the last. We are as poor as they say. But when the time came to take responsibility, we asked these masters to leave. Why don't they want to leave?
Chapter 1. Military Withdrawal.
Our next story is from Africa, from Côte d'Ivoire in the west. In English, that's the Ivory Coast. The country has a New Year's resolution. It has made a pledge to kick out French troops. That's right, Paris has lost yet another African stronghold. The Ivory Coast is the latest country to show France the door. It follows other former French colonies like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, and Senegal.
In recent years, African nations like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have demanded a full withdrawal of French troops from their soil. Once welcomed under the banner of anti-terror operations like Operation Barkhane, France's military presence is now widely seen as a symbol of neo-colonial control. One by one, governments, often newly led by military leaders, have expelled French forces, citing national sovereignty, distrust, and interference.
But Macron does not see it that way. He says Paris is not on the back foot. Instead, he blames the African nations. Macron called them, and I'm quoting, ungrateful. And then he said, and let me quote again, none of them would be in a sovereign country today if the French army had not been deployed in this region. This is the French president, the leader of a former colonial power, talking about countries that won their independence from France. Macron says the French army is responsible for their sovereignty. How tone-deaf can you be? If anything, the African countries would have been sovereign sooner if not for the French army. Macron's mental gymnastics are truly world-class, but obviously the African nations were not impressed. Chad and Senegal have called him out. Chad's foreign minister issued a statement. He said Macron holds, and I'm quoting again, a contemptuous attitude towards Africa and Africans. He added that the French presence in Chad has often been limited to its own strategic interests without any real lasting impact for the development of the Chadian people. And then he reminded Macron about how Africans had helped France, especially during the two world wars. That was Chad's rebuke. Senegal's was even sharper. Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko put up this post on social media. He counters Macron's claims, saying that France helped destabilize countries like Libya, which contributed to the Sahel security crisis. And then Sonko issued a parting shot. Let me quote again. This is what he said. This is finally the place to remind President Macron that if African soldiers, sometimes forcibly mobilized, mistreated and ultimately betrayed, had not deployed during the Second World War to defend France, it would perhaps still be Germany today.
This is a major setback for France. Paris had relied on its African bases to project power. They helped France wield influence in its former colonies. But now, that influence has all but dried up.
Chapter 2. Economic Shift. The CFA franc, a currency tied to the French treasury, has long been a point of contention. Critics argue it allows Paris to control African economies, but now countries are breaking away. West Africa is pushing toward a new currency, the ECO, and economic independence.
For a decade, there have been talks by West Africa's 15 nations bloc, ECOWAS, to ditch the CFA franc currency and come up with their own eco-currency. Military rulers argue that it is not about just changing the currency, but a fight for sovereignty. Finance ministers of the Sahel plan to weigh up the option of setting up a monetary union. Critics say that the CFA is a neocolonialism tool which keeps the African economies hostage.
Meanwhile, natural resources like gold and uranium, long extracted by French firms, are being renationalized or redirected to new allies, including Russia, China, and Turkey. Chapter 3. Rise of Pan-Africanism. Young leaders like Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso have become the faces of a bold, defiant movement. They speak of dignity, sovereignty, and an Africa free from foreign domination.
Some countries have been exploiting uranium to produce energy for themselves. From Ottawa to Paris, the streets are lit up. That's the light. But in Niger, it's darkness that is served to us. They enjoy saying it every year in their economic surveys. Burkina Faso is the poorest country, Mali is the poorest country, Niger is the poorest country. We are ranked among the last. We are as poor as they say. But when the time came to take responsibility, we asked these masters to leave. Why don't they want to leave? When you go to our states, our lands are riddled with holes, everywhere in search of precious metals like gold, but often there isn't even the slightest accessible road to reach the areas where they exploit gold, let alone some basic social services.
Protests in Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou are not just anti-French, they are pro-African. Flags are burned, statues toppled, and slogans shouted, "France dégage! France, get out!" Today, former French allies are forging new paths. Russia's Wagner Group is stepping in. Turkey is opening embassies. China is building infrastructure. And African states are calling for African solutions to African problems. Pan-Africanism is resurging. Flags of colonial power are being lowered. Statues are being torn down. And leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, Assimi Goïta, Mahamat Déby, and Abdourahmane Chiani are rising as symbols of resistance. France once called these nations part of its pré-carré, its private backyard. But that era is over. From Mali to Niger, from CAR to Burkina Faso, African nations are reclaiming their land, their voice, their future. The message is loud and clear. France, your time is up. So, is France's grip on Africa finally slipping? The signs are everywhere. Military bases closed, trade ties weakening, youth awakened, leaders emboldened. Africa is rising, not just against France, but for itself. The colonial chapter is ending. The question now is, who writes the next one?